Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So it is that time of the month again where we're getting a new season in Marvel Snap. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the season and my general thoughts on the cards, the spotlight weeks, all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's dive right on into it. This season is themed around Sam Wilson, Captain America, and is being paired with the new Captain America Brave New World movie. So first movie tie-in we've had in a little bit. In general, my feelings towards this season, at least in terms of the spotlight caches, aren't super high. I think that in general, this is a bit more of a sleeper season compared to the months prior in January and December. I think those were kind of pretty banger months, a lot of really, really good cards. And I think that the February spotlights, both with the old cards and the new cards, just aren't really up to that level. But maybe that's okay because we do have some additional cards coming in via the limited time mode, which we just learned about. And March looks like a really good month as well. We'll look at that towards the end of the video. But if you've been waiting for a month where you maybe don't really need to, or don't really feel like you're going to miss out on a lot of the new cards because they don't interest you or they don't seem super strong, maybe February is your month to stockpile up those resources in anticipation of some of the really cool stuff we have coming in March. So let's take a look at the cards and the weeks here. First up, we have Sam Wilson, Captain America. This is the season pass card, and in my opinion, I think this is the most exciting and interesting card of the month. So he is a 2/3 with GameStar. Add Cap Shield to a random location. Ongoing, you can move Cap Shield. And then Cap Shield is a 1/1 ongoing. This can't be destroyed, and it gives your Cap +2 power when this moves to Cap's location. And this works both for Sam Wilson and the original Captain America. It does not work for things like Captain Marvel. Some people are confused about that, but yeah, just Captain America's here. I think this card is interesting and strong. I think this is a very strong card. The main reason for this is pretty simple. It's always giving you a free point of power. It helps get early priority. It has good synergy with things like Cull Obsidian, so you never have to worry about drawing your 1-drops to be able to play your Cull. That's really good. And in general, the body that it is attached to is a pretty good on-rate card, 2/3, that if you get one move, suddenly you have a 2/5, and it can be even bigger than that. And if you have Sam Wilson and Captain America, they both get very, very large pretty quickly. So this just seems pretty strong, but I think the way this card is probably going to be strongest is just using it on its own as just like a generically good 2-drop that is very well statted. That just seems like the best way to use this card. I mean, I think it will be good with Captain America too, but I think that a lot of people might be underestimating just how good this card is on its own, because it doesn't really need synergy. It's just points. It just works with itself. Even in the games where you don't get Sam Wilson, getting a free 1 power on the board really isn't a bad thing. Sure, it takes up a board slot, but I think the amount of times that is actually a downside is fairly negligible. So yeah, I think this is the most interesting and maybe the most powerful card of the month, and it's the one I am personally most excited to be brewing with. But let's take a look at the spotlight weeks. So first week we have Joaquin Torres, Makari, and Namora. Joaquin is essentially a Wong for 1-drops. That seems like it could be powerful. Double Iceman, double Silver Sable. I mean, there are some 1-drops with pretty strong effects. But what I've felt and what I've seen many other good bounce players feel is that this is a bit too slow of a card, because that means the earliest you're often going to be able to make use of it is going to be on turn 4. And usually, turn 4, turn 5, those are the turns you want to start bouncing things. And if you're going to be bouncing things, then you don't have as much energy to commit to Joaquin. So I don't really know if this card's going to end up finding a home. I think it's very much a feast or famine card. If it's good, I think it'll be very good. But if it's bad, I think it'll be very bad. I don't think there's really a middle ground with this card. And personally, I'm leaning more on the bad side. Bounce is a deck that really hasn't been played in a while outside of Move Bounce, which recently got nerfed and which also doesn't really want this card. So I would love for this to give Bounce a little bit more juice, but I'm not totally sold on it being able to do that. The other cards, Makari and Nomura. Nomura just got a buff. Makari's always been a little bit of a sleeper, where I think a lot of people underrate this card, but it's actually not that bad of a card. But its main home is like a silver Surfer deck, and there are so many good premium 3-drops in Surfer decks. I think a lot of people just aren't really as interested in a 0/4, even though that can be strong. So I think this is not that great of a week overall. These mostly are cards you can skip. Nomura is a fun build around, but even with the recent buff is far from being a big meta contender. So not really a super hot week here. Then we have Thaddeus Ross, Blink, and Nebula. So Thaddeus Ross is a 2/2, and if your opponent doesn't spend all their energy in a turn, you get to draw a 10 power or greater card from your deck. Drawing is a really powerful effect in card games, and especially in Marvel Snap where we have such a small deck size. However, I don't really see the deck that wants this card. I've seen some people theorycraft that maybe this can work in like a Searcher Scar kind of deck to get your big dudes or to find your Scar, and it's like, yeah, maybe. But the thing I really don't like about this card is it's also very feast or famine. It's either working or not, and the later you get it, the less useful it actually is. This is a card you really want to play on turn 2 or turn 3, and every turn after that, it's getting significantly worse, it feels like. So I'm not super sold on this card being that great. I think the decks that do run the cards that this thing can tutor often don't have enough free space to run this card, and I think in general, playing a understated body for an effect that is largely all within your opponent's control is usually a pretty tough sell. So I'm not super big on Thaddeus. In terms of the other cards, Nebula's okay, but there have been many opportunities to get Nebula. Blink is a big one though, because this is her first time making an appearance in Spotlight Caches since she was in the Season Pass almost a year ago. I think last May is when she came out. So Blink is a really good card. It is mainly played in Hela decks as well as some Electro Ramp stuff. Not a whole ton of play outside of there, but it is a very powerful piece in those decks. So I think out of the 3 cards here, Blink is probably the most enticing, though her decks are a little niche, but she is a very key element to making them work. So if those decks interest you, might not be a bad week to go for. But I think if you're not interested in Blink, I think it's probably going to be a pass week. Then we have Redwing, Baron Zemo, and Loki. So much like Blink, this is Zemo's first appearance to Spotlights since his initial release via Season Pass. He did also have a bundle, so there was another chance to get him, but if you're a free-to-play player or maybe you missed the bundle, this is your first chance at getting Baron Zemo, who has been a little bit more popular recently in the Mill archetype. Redwing's kind of an interesting card. I think it's one of the more interesting cards this month. It is a 3/3 that when it moves for the first time, it will pull something from your hand and put it into play at the location it moved from. This could be fairly strong with, you know, a bunch of big stuff in your hand, like an Infinite, like a Heimdall, that kind of stuff. I don't really see what deck specifically wants this card, though. Maybe it'll make a new deck, but I think this is one of those cards where it's a powerful effect that doesn't currently slot into an existing archetype, and I'm not convinced that just the power of its effect is going to be enough to warrant a build around, but maybe if we see a little bit more support for some of this like move, cheat out stuff theme, maybe Redwing will be really good over time, but I'm not expecting it to be a breakout success upon release. And then Loki. Loki's been bad for a really long time. Pretty much ever since he got changed to a 2/2, this card has been very bad. However, they have said multiple times that they plan to adjust Loki, whether that's a small buff, whether that's a big rework like we got last time Loki got changed, who knows? But I wouldn't be surprised if they try and implement whatever change they have cooking for Loki before they bring him back in the Spotlight week to make that week a bit more appealing. So in his current form, Loki is very much a card you do not need and probably should not play. But by the time he comes out in the Spotlight week, maybe they will have fixed that via an OTA patch, and he'll be more appealing. So I guess keep an eye out for that one. But in general, I don't think Redwing is going to be a major one worth pulling for here. But Baron Zemo, pretty good if you want to play Mill, and maybe Loki gets a big buff. So the verdict is still out on that one. And then the last but not least week, we have Diamondback. Diamondback is a 3/3, where she essentially afflicts your opponent's cards that are already afflicted with 2 additional negative power. So this is very strong with things like Man-Thing and Hazbat. And I think it will be a solid addition to the Affliction archetype. That essentially is a lot of stats, and you really only need one other card to combo it with. So to me, I think Diamondback is actually probably the second best card of this month outside of the Season Pass. So yeah, I think this one is the most appealing new card out of the bunch we've looked at so far. In terms of the other cards here, Nimrod and Phoenix Force, both kind of niche. I mean, some decks even play them together, using Nimrod as the backup plan for a Phoenix Force deck. But neither of these decks have been super popular in the metagame for a while. They're not really bad per se. I think they're playable, but they definitely are not like top of the meta decks. They, have been around for a while and haven't really gotten too much in the way of new pieces. So I think they've just kind of petered out over time, but they can still be fun to play if you haven't gotten them already. But both these cards have been in Spotlights before. So outside of Diamondback, I don't think this is going to be a super appealing week for a lot of people. So yeah, like I said at the start, I think this is a bit more of a sleeper month. I don't think the cards and the caches here are the most exciting outside of some first reappearances from old Season Pass cards. I think this is going to be a month where a lot of people skip stuff, especially because there is cool stuff coming in March that looks a lot more exciting, both in terms of new cards and higher quality Spotlight weeks. But in the developer update yesterday, we did get some information about the new Sanctum Showdown mode, and there are going to be 3 new cards available in it: Laufey, Gorgon, and Uncle Ben. And honestly, I think I'm more excited for like all 3 of these cards than I am for almost all the cards in the caches this month. These are going to be only available through the new mode while it is out, and it does launch on February 18th. And then later on in March, they will also be making their way to the token shop as Series 4 cards. But if you want to get them right away during the season, you're going to have to do it through the new mode. Laufey is a 4/5 on reveal, steal 1 power from each other card here. To me, this seems pretty strong. Obviously, stealing power from your own stuff is kind of like a net neutral. You're taking one away, but you're gaining it back to the same lane, so it doesn't really affect your lane. But we've seen in general, stealing proves to be a very powerful effect with things like Rocket and Groot or Cassandra Nova. So I think this can get pretty big pretty fast, and it gets even better if you've maybe hit it with a bit of cost reduction a la Zabu. So I think this card's going to be pretty strong. Gorgon is more of a tech card, but a powerful tech card nonetheless. 2/3 ongoing. Your opponent's cards that didn't start in their deck cost 1 more. Big rip to Thanos. Really hurts Thanos, hurts Arsham, Kate Bishop arrows, the Victoria hand card generation stuff, Demon. This hits a lot of very powerful stuff that is fairly prevalent in the game right now. So I think this is going to be a really, really strong tech card, particularly if you want to hose those aforementioned archetypes. Then Uncle Ben. When this card is destroyed, replace it with Spider-Man. 1/2. So this one has been in the game for forever. I think this is probably the weakest of the 3, but it is kind of the funniest, and I do think it has some niche application, mainly kind of like how we see Nova in Killmonger decks. I think Uncle Ben is a card you will just consider in Killmonger decks. I think you're going to build your deck around destroying Uncle Ben, but if you can want to leverage Killmonger in your deck already, and you can change your 1/2 into a 2/4 that moves something, that seems like a decent upgrade if you were already going to be playing Killmonger to kill stuff anyway. So I think that is a interesting consideration. I don't think it's quite as universally appealing as some of the other cards that are in this new mode, but I think it is cool and fun, and it'll be neat to toy around with nonetheless. So those are all going to be in the limited time mode. We don't really have specifics on how hard it's going to be to get the cards, but when we know more about that around the mode's release, I'll try and have a bit of a guide and some suggestions up on the best way to grind it to get access to these new cards for free, because I think these cards are honestly way more appealing than most of the other cards releasing this month. And before we wrap things up, I do always like showing the March spotlights, just so you can have a little bit of a moment to plan ahead. And like I said previously, I think March is going to be a banger month that a lot of people are saving for. And yeah, because the card quality just seems to be higher. We have Esson, which seems to be like the next Arsham. It's a big build around card that's going to give +2 to all the cards in your deck as long as all your cards have a unique power. Seems really busted. And he is being joined by Wiccan and Beta Ray Bill. This is Wiccan's first reappearance. So I think that's going to be a very, very appealing week to many players who missed out on Wiccan the first time or just want to pick up Esson. Starbrand seems like an all-star in the Scar decks. He's getting a additional +2 power at the start of the game for each card in your deck with 10 or more power. So he gets really, really big and can be a nice way to close out the game in addition to a free Scar. And Fastos is here too. Not quite as powerful or exciting, but if you want a on-ramp to have a good Scar deck, maybe you didn't get Scar yet, that seems like a good week. Firehawk, Cassandra Nova, and Nico on the following week. This is Cassandra Nova's first appearance in Spotlights. Really good anti-Arsham card. Nico, been here many times before, but still a very good card if you haven't picked her up yet. And then Firehair is a kind of unique card that is very similar to the Phoenix Force, though slightly different. This card can be moved once, and when it does move, you get to resurrect one of your previously destroyed cards to where it moves to. So similar-esque mechanic to the Phoenix Force, a little different, but interesting nonetheless. And then last but not least, we have Khonshu, Scorn, and Cersei. We don't exactly know what Khonshu does yet, but it does have different forms, so maybe it'll be something like Nico, or like maybe original Snowguard, where it was transforming into the different forms. We don't know yet, but it sounds like an interesting card. Usually the cards that do have effects like that are often pretty cool designs. And then Scorn, absolute all-star in discard, and Cersei, a bit more of a niche card, but does see some play in some Annihilus Sentry lists. So those are your spotlights for March. Keep an eye out for them on the future, and I think overall a lot of players are going to be saving for these spotlight weeks as opposed to the ones in February, because they just seem a lot better and a lot more exciting. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for our season review. I'll also be streaming with the new season and the new cards when it drops this afternoon, so keep an eye out here on YouTube or on Twitch if you're interested in catching some gameplay with the new stuff. But that's going to wrap it up for our season review video. Overall, February, not the most exciting season in the world, but I am excited for the season pass card, as well as the bonus cards from the limited time mode. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. And just being able to play the new limited time mode itself, because as someone who was a bit more underwhelmed by the February cards, I thought it was going to be a bit more boring of a month, but the new mode looks really fun, and the rewards look really good. So that's definitely something to look forward to later on this month. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know what you think of the season, the cards, all that stuff in the comments below. And if you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.